Okay, so is God a misogynist? This is the question that I want to talk a little bit about today. This has been kind of asserted by a number of different atheists and people who don't agree with the Christian religion over time. Um, it's misogyny, God being misogynist is thrown in there with homophobia and megalomaniacal and a bully and mean and all these kinds of things. So, we're going to talk a little bit about, is God a misogynist? Okay, so the story that uh, in the Bible I want to talk to you about that has some bearing on this question about whether God is a misogynist is the story of Zelophehad. Actually, the four daughters of Zelophehad. Then the story takes place just as the Israelites are kind of making their way into Canaan, which is current day Israel. And as they're making their way there, God is giving them the various laws for which they're to abide by, the Ten Commandments, various food laws and worshiping laws and civil laws and all of this. But as the laws were given, a lot of times there were questions or clarifications that needed to be made about these laws that were being given. And this story kind of falls into that kind of category of things that happen in the Bible. It's a clarification. So a law is given where uh, the land inheritance is only by sons. So if a father has a son and then he has three daughters, he would the land inheritance goes to the son. If he had five sons, it would be allotted to the five sons, so on and so forth. So, in the case of Zelophehad, he had only four daughters and no sons. And the daughters um, had an issue. So the daughters of Zelophehad actually they get up in front of the entire congregation of Israel, which it's Moses, it's all the priests, it's all the soldiers, it's the entire population of Israel, which was around 600,000 men, which it's probably in the millions when you include women and children. So a huge number of people. They get up there and they say, there is a problem here because our father has died, and there is only four daughters that he has had, and our family name is going to be lost because his name will have no land inheritance in the new Canaan. And so these four daughters get up there in front of all the Israelites and they make their case about this. And Moses takes it to God, according to the Bible. So, if God is a misogynist, what would be God's response to this? And again, just to clarify, what is misogyny, right? Like misogyny is actually hating women, having it out for women. Um, Discrimination just basically solely because you are a woman. Um, Being violent towards women in particular. This is what misogyny is. So if God is really this terrible thing, then how would God respond in this scenario? And I could imagine God saying something like, who are these women to stand up in front of the congregation? They need to know their place, or maybe some kind of punishment, we need to set an example that women should not be getting up and asking for things. I could imagine a whole slew of things that God would say if he was a misogynist. However, what God actually does is he tells Moses, These four daughters of Zelophehad are right. What they're asking for is correct. And what the daughters were asking for actually was that um, instead of it going to another male heir, so actually it would go to one of Zelophehad's brothers. That instead that some portion of the inheritance go to these four daughters. And you get the sense from reading it that all they're really asking for is some portion, as small as it might be, just so that the name survives. They just want their father's name, their family name to survive. Him having no sons. So God sides with these women and identifies with their case. Now, not only does he grant them a portion of the inheritance, but then he goes on to say that God gives them the entire inheritance. So all of the inheritance goes to the four daughters, and then this way that the family name can be preserved. Now, this is very peculiar behavior for someone who is supposedly misogynist. And there are a number of other types of things you find in the Bible that kind of hint that this is perhaps not right. Like there were, say, for example, prominent leaders in Israel's history that were women, such as Miriam and Deborah, who was a judge in Israel comparable to Samson. Um, there were actually, when they're putting together laws, there were other laws that were put in place to specifically protect women. Like recognizing that women were in a vulnerable position and putting laws in place to protect them from this vulnerability, such as, you couldn't just divorce a woman just because you wanted to. There had to be some kind of proof, and the justice system was set up in a way that you had to be able to concretely prove that there was unfaithfulness or something serious, some serious reason for divorcing. Um, Specific commandments about not taking advantage of widows. If a man seduced a woman or had sex with a woman, then he would be forced to take responsibility for her, to marry her and bring her into his family, and so just allowing her to be used, and get her pregnant and then leave her on her own. So more protections, for women. Yeah, so it just seems like that's odd behavior for someone who's being accused as a misogynist. Um, so uh, I don't know. What do you think? What does your reading of the Bible say? I don't know. Honestly, the way that I look at it, obviously the the way the Bible is written, it obviously supports a patriarchy. Okay, and that word has come to be, the word patriarchy has come to be, I don't know, almost like a swear word. It's anyway, but in the Bible, a patriarchy is certainly supported. But I wouldn't say that God has gone out of his way to create, like he didn't create a patriarchy according to the Bible. I think God more acknowledges that this is what the situation is. This is the culture that has developed, for whatever reason, legitimate or not legitimate. And God, instead of, I guess, trying to radically change the culture, God puts in place protections that will ensure that, you know, men don't have too much opportunity to take advantage of women. Um, and you see this happen in other places too in the Bible, like for example with divorce. Jesus says later on in the Bible that Moses gave you divorce via a paper. Um, However, this is not how God intended it. God intended it that if you get married, then you're married for life, and that's what it is. But because of the hardness of your hearts, is what Jesus says, God or Moses gave you this kind of, or Moses through God gave you this way to get divorced, and so then you can see like Jesus is actually trying to move them to the next step and saying like, look, like the only real reason for divorce should be marital unfaithfulness, full stop. And so progressively moving the culture in the direction that God wants them to go. And I think that this is how God works. And so at the time, women probably had zero rights and zero freedoms to be able to speak for themselves, and God put laws in place to move them forward, so that there were more rights for women and more freedoms for women through the law. So I don't know. This is what I think. This is what I read. What do you think? Leave your comments in the comments section. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.